not, worry about makeups and boys until much later. So they worry about families and studying first and so on. So it's my personal experience.
So thank you. I think it's a combination of both economic necessity as well as, sort of use that
good
gain
afternoon,
prestige
and
both
thank
in the
you
family and
all
society,
for
which
coming to this very
pushes
important
girls to
session.
move ahead.
We were talking
So it's a
amongst
combination
ourselves,
of
and one
both
thing we did
economic
notice is
considerations,
that
but also
the mainstreaming of
normative
this
values
session
that they
is
want
one
to
of
stand
the
for, which
first
is leading to
panels,
all of this. And I'm sure
right
there are
after the main
lessons
inaugural
there
session,
for India,
we are very happy to note that kind of primacy is being given to this topic.
Sexualization
We have a very
of,
distinguished panel here.
minors and girls
We
that we talked
have
about.
women
Very similar
leaders from the
principles there.
field of
Gabriele, I wanted to
academia,
turn to you.
government and politics,
And in your experience
as
in,
well as
OECD,
from
you yourself
the
has
civil
led
society
a very important
movement.
inclusion,
And we are hoping to have some very
and a
interesting
program,
conversations about
looking through
the
all
role
the
of power
work which you
in terms
you
of
are leading.
shaping the
One
presence
thing
and
I did
participation
want
of
to
women
check
both in the
with you is
workforce
that
and also
what are the
in
areas
terms
in the
of
domain
playing
of
important and
policymaking?
relevant roles
What are the
economically as well as
areas which you
socially.
think are
We
working
also
well
want to touch upon the necessity to create more discursive spaces where we can have these conversations in an open and respectful way to make sure that women are playing a more constructive and participatory role in both in terms of policy making
the
and as well
reality
as
is
in
that
terms of delivering the right level of
the
impact.
gender agenda has
So I
been
do
with
want
us
to
for
introduce
decades.
my very distinguished
And
panel
I think
over
it was
here.
actually in China when we had the Beijing conference for
Pascal
women.
Fabio, who
And progress is
a
being
senior
very
academic,
slow.
and
So what at the OECD we
represents,
perceive as a
the
great
faculty of engineering and computer science
push
from
to
the
this
Hong
agenda
Kong University of Science
is
and
when
Technology.
we frame the issue
Gabriela
not as a moral
Ramos from the
imperative,
OECD.
which it is,
She was the
not as an
Sherpa
ethical
at
imperative,
OECD
which is
Sherpa at
also
G20,
a matter
and has
of,
had a very distinguished
empowerment of
career
women.
at the OECD.
But we frame it
We
as a
have
business
Wendy
case.
Sherman, comes with a long
Because
career
in all
US
of our
government
economies,
and
in all of
currently
our
is a
countries,
senior
OECD
counsel
and
at
emerging economies,
Albright,
governments
Albright
have invested a
Stonebridge.
lot in educating women.
We have
School attainment has
Robin
increased a
Garma,
lot.
who runs,
the years of schooling
leads
has
a very
increased a lot, so
important
these
and
are real
interesting,
investment in human capital
movement, global
that
movement,
then go waste
which is
when you
focusing
go
on
for the labor
reproductive
market
justice.
or
I
for
should
the
talk
business
a
sector
little
where women
bit
is
more about
completely
that as we go through the
underrepresented.
panel.
So I think
and
that
of course
has
we'll have
been
the
a very great
Honorable Minister for
progress.
Information and
And we
Broadcasting
put this
Textiles,
issue in the agenda
Smriti
of
Irani
the
joining
G20.
us. She's running
And I
a
have to
little
tell
late.
you, when we
She will be
started
joining us
saying,
as well.
okay, let's
I want
look
to
at
kick off this
gender
session
agenda
by
for the G20
turning to
leaders
you,
who are dealing with the
Pascal.
world
One
economy.
thing which we've noticed, and
many
this is
people look
something
at
the
us like
research
saying,
and the data
"Excuse
shows,
me,
is that the
are
lead
you
rates
crazy?
for women
This is nothing
in
to do with us."
STEM education as
Until
well
we
as in science
produce a
and
modeling
technology
work that
is a
showed
maximum of 10 years.
that
They will stay invested
reducing the
for 10 years
gender
and then
gap
they
in
exit.
labor force
Research shows that there are a
participation in
variety
women
of factors
will
which are
produce
contributing
a
to
1%
this isolation,
growth in all
hostile
the
work
G20
environment,
economies.
lack of sponsors.
So there was a fantastic case.
And
Of course, let me
ineffective
tell you that
just
it was the
overall
US
management
Sherpa, it was
that
the
they
Australian
received.
Sherpa, and it was the OECD
What was
Sherpa. who
interesting
put the
for
whole
us
thing
to
together,
note is
but
that
we were three
Hong Kong
women.
and the Greater China
So we said,
region kind of
it's
bucks
gonna
the
look like
strength because you
self-serving.
have
So
a
we asked the
relatively higher
Japanese
percentage
Sherpa
of women
to propose
in
it.
STEM
Because
as well as
actually
in
in
S&T
Japan,
education.
what is driving
So what are
progress
the
is the
lessons
fact that they are an
we can
aging
learn?
society
In
and they
particular,
need
in
to
this
bring more
country,
women
what we
into the
can
labor market.
learn
So I think that
in
this
terms of
building
the
of the business case
experiences
was
which
good.
you've had.
It was good because
how did you
also
get
led
it
us
right in
to
terms of
understand
correcting
better
that
what
gap?
are the policy areas in which we can intervene.
First of all, thank
and
you
get
for
progress.
inviting me to the
And it's
panel,
pretty
and thank you for what
straightforward.
you
It's
said
just
about
about
Greater
leveling
China.
the playing field.
So the truth is
Why?
we're still fighting
Because
gender
women
inequality
have
in
special
STEM,
needs
in
due to
our
maternity
region
issues,
of the world as
and
well.
because societies
But I
have
think
decided that the
relatively
role of women
speaking,
is to take care of
Greater
children.
China's,
So what do you do?
has
Well, you
this
go
culture
for better
of
burden sharing
putting
between
value
men
on
and women.
education, family
You go
culture. So
into
parents will
getting for
encourage their
dual
children
parental leave
to get into the
for men and women. So then you avoid
fields
companies and
where
you
they can
avoid governments
thrive.
to
And
discriminate
in particular,
women
there's a
at
traditional notion that
childbearing
STEM
age.
is the most
You go into
prestigious,
investment
still
in
considered the most
infrastructure for
prestigious
childcare
path
facilities.
to a good
You
job.
go for
So the economic necessity
eliminating
of
discriminatory
the region, China,
laws
Hong Kong,
or
and many of these
issues
Asian
like
countries
the
not
wage
long
gap.
time ago
I was
were
actually
still very
surprised
poor.
to see that
So the economic
the wage gap
necessity,
for
and
equal
plus
jobs
the
in the
inclusion,
OECD is about 17%.
ideal of
In China
studying
it's
really hard and then you can
55%.
be somebody
Why?
very
Same
much
jobs,
play a role. And
same
in addition, I
effort,
would say
same
that
but you have
for
lower
Chinese cultures where
remuneration. So
either
I
your
think this
daughter,
kind of
it doesn't matter your daughter or
equalizing
son,
policies
as
are
long as
very
you're the one
important.
who can lift the family out of poverty.
But then there are emerging
traditionally
issues. Even in
really
OECD
hard,
countries that we were
because
commenting
the
on
education
that.
system
All these rules, all
in
these
East Asia is very
infrastructural,
much
these
exam-based. And the
policies,
girls
I
are
think
doing,
that have been
traditionally done pretty
advancing
well.
in all the
And
countries.
we
And
do
I think
well in
that's
our
good
exams.
news.
And
Even
that
quotas,
is,
because one of the
that is
areas
the
in which
most
women are
important
really low
factor of social
representation
mobility.
is in the business
So that's very
sector,
much valued.
where the Forbes and the Calcarant
the bright
only have
daughters of the family
5% representation
have
of women,
to
so
have
quotas
the,
work when
responsibility
you
of lifting
design
the
them
entire
in a way
family,
that is merit-based.
to the next level.
But one of the
economic
emerging
prosperity.
areas
So
in which we
that's
are
still-
really concerned
that's the, I
is
think, the most
violence
motivating
against women.
factor. And in
Because
terms
the
of
reality
STEM, I
is that
think,
we have made
a
progress
lot
on the
lot of
economic
parts of the
sphere, we
world
have made progress
value
on these
STEM,
policy areas.
because it's
One
seen as
issue
more
that is
sure
really
path
worrisome
to,
in all of the
prosperity,
advanced economies,
medical
in all of the emerging
sciences
economies,
or
is violence
engineering. I
against
think
women.
it's also
1
true
out of
in
4
India.
women in
I
advanced
think the other
economies
thing
is
that
suffering
is a
violence
little
everywhere.
different in
So
Greater
this
China
is an area
compared
that
to
we need
perhaps
to
India,
address. And then
is
the
the
most
lack of,
difficult
sexualized
part where
environment for
I
young
think
girls.
progress has been very slow
so
and
Chinese
is
culture,
preventing
East
us to
Asian
make more
culture,
progress on the policy
until very
field
recently,
is fighting
so the pop
gender
culture is starting
stereotyping
to
and
change,
cultural norms.
unfortunately.
Because
which tend
you
to
can see it,
sexualize
I
young
have to
women
say, and I have
young
to
girls,
recognize
which
Korea
I
just
think is very, very
produce a dual
But
parental
until recently,
option,
that is not the case.
given the
So
most
traditionally,
generous
Chinese women
time frame for men to go and take care of children.
1
month.
Much,
You know who
later.
take that
so
up?
they worry about families and
Zero.
studying first. And
So it's
on.
not
So
only
it's
about
my
the rules.
personal-
It's how do you change the cultural
So thank
norms
you.
of
I think it's
women?
a combination
Men, and
of
I have
both
to say that I'm
economic
very happy to
necessity
see so many men in
as
the
well
audience,
as,
because the reality
sort
is
of
that men
use
are
that
also
to
preventing
claim
themselves
prestige
from
both within
enjoying
the
their
family and
families
society,
and their
which
children. This is one of
pushes
the areas
girls
where
to
we
move
really
ahead.
need to move.
So it's a
it also
combination
impacts the
of both
question of STEM
economic
because you are
considerations, but
designing
also
some
the
roles for
normative
girls,
values
some
which
roles
they
for
want to
women,
stand for,
and this is the
leading to all of this.
expectations that
And I'm
build
sure
up
there are
in where you
lessons
locate
there
yourself
for India,
in the
including very
economic and the
consistent
social
values
frame.
in India as well.
So
in terms of
fascinating.
the
I found like
sexualization
two
of,
statistics
minors
fascinating.
and girls that
One
you talked about.
is the fact
Very
of
similar
violence
principles
against
there.
women.
Gabriele, I
How
wanted
much
to
of
turn
a
to you.
universal
And in your
problem
experience
it
in
is,
including
OECD,
even in the
yourself has
G7 and the
led a
very important
20 countries, 1 out of 4
strategy
women
and
suffering
a
or being
program
subjected to violence is
looking
terrifying,
through all
terrifying
the work
statistic.
which you were
I
you
also
are leading.
think
one thing I
this
did
entire
want to
point which
check with you is that
men
what are
not
the
opting to
areas in the
take
domain of
those
policy
paternity
making?
leave.
What are
I
the
sometimes
areas
wonder
which
that
you
whether
think
is
are
this
working
the FOMO
well
disease, whether it is more prevalent
insofar as
amongst men
generation
than
is
in
concerned,
women.
and where are you facing
Obviously,
most resistance?
I'm sure there will be some male voices who will speak to that, but I
Well,
often wonder that
thank you for
are
the
the victims of
invitation and
FOMO
good afternoon,
more than
everybody.
women are. But turning to
The
you,
reality is that
Wendy,
the
you
gender
did something
agenda
which
has
was-
been
I
with
was
us for
fascinated
decades.
by, which is
And I think it was actually in
negotiating
China when we had the
Iran
Beijing
nuclear agreement.
conference for women.
So getting
And
into
progress
a
is
domain of
being
national
very
security
slow.
and strategic affairs, which
So
almost
what at the
entirely is
OECD we
male-dominated.
perceive as a
And
great
also, I think there is this attribution. There's again a stereotype, but there is an attribution
push
that
to
whenever
this agenda
technical details
is
are
when we
concerned, where you really
frame
have
the
to hunker down and
issue
go over
not
technical
as
data,
a moral imperative,
and
which
requires
it
a
is,
lot of brain power.
not
Women
as an
normally
ethical
would
imperative,
not
which is
be
also
chosen
a
for
matter
those roles
of
because those are tough
empowerment
jobs.
of women.
How
but
did
we
you
frame
deal
it as a business case.
with the environment, and also how did
Because
you break
in
that
all of our
stereotype and
economies,
become
in
part
all of our
that
countries,
negotiating
OECD
team?
and emerging
Well, it's great
economies,
to be part of this, and
governments
because
have
we were
invested a
little
lot
late,
in
we all got to
educating
have
women.
a little seminar
School
with each
attainment
other
has
before we
increased a
got
lot.
to you all today.
The
so
years
thank
of
you for
schooling
that
has
opportunity.
increased a lot, so these are real
I
investment in
said
human
to my
capital
colleagues here
that then go waste
what I wanted to most
when you go
talk
for the
about
labor market or
here
for the business
was
sector where
power.
women is completely underrepresented.
How
So I think
a
that
lot of
has
you in this
been a
audience
very
have it,
great
and a lot of
progress.
us want
And we
it.
put this issue in the agenda of the G20.
And when you have power,
And I have to tell you, when we
it's very hard to
started
give it up.
saying, okay, let's look
In
at
the times
gender
I've had
agenda
power in
for
my
the
life, I
G20
didn't
leaders
want to
who are
share
dealing
it
with the
or
world
give it up.
economy. And many people
but
look
we
at
are
us
at a
like saying,
place where
excuse
we
me,
know that
are you
when
crazy?
girls
This
are
has nothing to do
educated,
with us.
it is the
Until
single
we
most
produce a modeling
important factor
work
in rising
that
GDP.
showed that
As
reducing
my
the
colleagues
gender
have said,
gap
when
in
women are in the
labor force
workforce, you get
participation
rising
of women women
GDP.
will produce
When
a
women are on
1%
boards
growth in all
of
the G20
companies,
economies.
it
So
increases
there
the
was a
return on
fantastic
investment.
case. Of course, let me
And
tell you that it
increases
was
sales.
the US
There's
Sherpa,
data,
it was the
there's an
Australian Sherpa,
economic
and it was the OECD
backdrop to
Sherpa
this.
who
So
put the
if
whole
you
thing
guys
together,
wanna
but we were
succeed,
3 women.
I
So we
would
said,
urge
you
you to
know,
share a little power
it's going to
because
look
you'll
like
get more
self-serving. So we
back
asked the
in
Japanese
return.
Sherpa,
to propose
So to
it.
go to the
Because
question
actually
that,
in Japan,
you asked,
what is driving progress is the
very
fact
unusual
that they are in an
circumstance.
aging society and they need to
The
bring
High
more women into
Representative
the
of the
labor market.
European
So I
Union,
think that this building of the business case was
organized
good.
and ran
It was good because
the
also
P5
led us
plus one, the
to
permanent
understand
members
better
of the
what are
Security
the
Council
policy
plus
areas in
Germany,
which we can
in
intervene
negotiations
and
with
get
Iran.
progress.
And
And
it
it's
was
pretty
first Cathy
straightforward.
Ashton
It's just
and
about
Federica
leveling
Mogherini.
the playing field.
The
Why?
deputy
Because women
to
have
the High
special
Representative
needs
Helga
due to
Schmidt,
maternity
phenomenal
issues,
German
and because
diplomat,
societies have decided that the
more
role of
time
women is to
negotiating with
take
the
care of
Iranians than
children.
anybody.
So what do? Well, you
And
go
I
for
led the
better
American team,
burden
so you
sharing
had
between
the
men and
entire
women.
Iran
You
negotiation
go into getting for
predominantly led
dual
by
parental
women,
leave
of course, Secretary
for
Kerry,
men and
Secretary
women.
Moniz
So
on
then
the
you
American
avoid
side,
companies and you
President
avoid
Obama
governments
were
to
absolutely
discriminate
critical
women
and very
at
engaged, but it was a
childbearing
very
age.
unusual
You
circumstance.
go
And
into
one of the
investment
things
in
that
infrastructure for
my dear
childcare
friend,
facilities.
business partner, and
You
former
go
boss
for
Madeleine Albright
this,
once
eliminating
taught me is
discriminatory
that
laws
when
or
I sit at an
issues
negotiating
like
table, I'm not
the wage
Wendy
gap.
Sherman,
I
I'm
was
not a
actually
woman. In
surprised
this
to
case,
see
I was
that
not a Jewish
the
American
wage gap
woman.
for
I was in
equal
the United
jobs
States
in
of
the
America.
OECD is about
And that's a lot of
17%.
power.
In China is
And I had no
55%.
qualms about using
Why?
that power.
Same jobs,
And I think
same
what
effort,
we women
same,
have to
but you have
understand and
lower
what we have to own
remuneration.
is
So I
not to
think
be
this kind
afraid
of
to use that power
equalizing
and to take that
policies
power.
are very
Whether
important.
we are talking about sexual violence,
But then there are
which is
emerging
very
issues,
present in
even
my own
in OECD
country at
countries,
the
and we were
moment.
commenting
It's
on
present
that.
everywhere
All
in the
these
world,
rules,
and
all these
certainly for poor
infrastructure, all
women,
these
there are no
policies, I think
resources,
that
there are
have
no ways
been
to deal with sexual
advancing
harassment,
in all
sexual
the
abuse, sexual
countries, and I think
misconduct.
that's good
But
news.
even wealthy
Even
women in my
quotas,
society,
because one
our
of the
famous
areas in which
actresses,
women are really
our
low
famous models
representation is in the
have
business
faced now
sector, where the
huge,
Forbes
huge
and the CAC Current
sexual
only have
misconduct,
5%
and finally
representation
can
of women,
talk
so
about it,
quotas
finally
work
can own
when
their
you
own power
design them in a way
in
that
the
is
universe.
merit-based.
And that is essentially what
But
it's
one
about.
of the
Many
emerging
years
areas
ago,
in which we are
I
really
started
concerned
life not as
is
a national security
violence
person, but
against
as
women.
a social worker, as
Because
a
the
community
reality is
organizer.
that we have made
And I did a
progress on
study
the
many,
economic
many
sphere,
years
we
ago.
have made progress on
Women
these
start
policy
most
areas,
community
but
organizations
one
in the United
issue that
States.
is
It's
really
probably
worrisome
true
in all of the
in
advanced
the entire
economies, in
world,
all of
and
the
they do
emerging
so because
economies,
they
is
wanna
violence
get
against women.
a
1 out
stop
of 4
sign so
women
their children can
in
play
advanced
safely.
economies is suffering
Or they
violence
want to
everywhere.
get better
So this
schools
is
for
an
their
area
children,
that
or
we
they
need
want to get a
to
toilet
address.
for
And
their
then the
child.
most difficult
Or they want
part
to have
where I
opportunities
think
for their
progress has
children.
been very
And as
slow
soon
and
as
is
money
preventing us to
started
make
coming
more
into
progress
those
on the
community
policy
organizations
field
in the United
is
States,
fighting gender stereotyping
men
and cultural
somehow
norms. Because
ended
you can
up
see it,
taking
I have
over.
to say, and I have to recognize
They became
Korea
the executive
just
directors, they became
produced
the
a
leaders,
dual
they became
parental
the presidents of the
option,
organization, and the
given
women
the most
disappeared
generous
because
time frame
it
for
was
men
about
to go and take
gaining
care of
that
children.
economic and
1
that
month.
fundamental power.
You know who take that
So
up?
my message
0.
to everyone in
So
the room
it's not
today
only about the rules. It's
is
how
to
do you
get
change
the
the
best
cultural
out of all
norms
of
that
the
prevent
people in our
men? And I have to
society
say that I'm very happy to see so
end
many
the
men in the
discrimination
audience,
that exists,
because the reality
to
is that
end
men
the
are
sexual
also
harassment
preventing
is
themselves
for
from
women to
enjoying
own
their families
their
and their
own
children.
power and
This is
not
one
be
of the
afraid of
areas
it.
where we really
It is
need
not
to
a bad and
and
dirty
it
thing.
also
It's
impacts
how
the
it
question of
gets
STEM, because
used
you are
that makes it
designing
bad and
some
dirty
roles for
and
girls,
corrupt.
some roles for women,
And for
this is
men
the expectations that
understand
build up
that you have mothers
and where
and
you locate
sisters and
yourself
daughters,
in the economic and the
and
social
you
frame.
want for them what you want for
Fascinating.
yourselves, which is every
I found
opportunity
like
there
two
might be in
statistics
the world.
fascinating.
So
One
please
is the
do
fact of
everything you
violence
can
against
to ensure they get it.
women. How much of a universal problem it is, including even in the G7 and the G20 countries, one out of 4 women suffering
Wendy talked
or being
about
subjected
power.
to
And
violence
Robin,
is
the work
terrifying,
which you
terrifying
do goes to the
statistic.
heart of that.
And I also
because you're dealing with the topic
think this entire
which
point
is
which you
so fundamental
that men
to
not
all
opting
women.
to
It's
take
about
those
reproductive
preventive
rights.
rights.
It's about reproductive
I
health.
sometimes wonder that whether
And,
is this the FOMO
we are
disease,
now in
whether
an
it is more
extraordinary
prevalent
situation,
amongst
as you
men
were
than in
sharing with
women.
me before this panel.
Obviously,
In terms of
I'm
the
sure
work
there will be
which
some
you are
male
doing,
voices
which
who will
to
speak to
be a
that,
she-
but I
she
often
decides,
wonder that
the
are
initiative
the
which you are
victims of
leading
FOMO
and which
more
India
than
is
women
going
are.
to join. and which
But
you're
turning
going
to
announce the
you,
program, soon, in
Wendy,
a matter of few weeks. Do you want
did
to talk
something which
about
I was fascinated.
what are
are the challenges which you are facing negotiating this moment? What is your expectation from the India program and the role that we can play as a country
of national
in helping support these goals and be an
which almost
example
entirely
in
is
our
male
region and rest of the world?
And also, I think there is this attribution. There's again a stereotype, but there is an attribution that whenever technical details are concerned, where you really have to hunker down and go over technical data,
some of the really
and
critical issues
requires
that
a
we
lot of
face in
brain power.
society.
Women
She
normally normally
Pesticides
would
was
not
created under a
be
year ago,
chosen for
and it
those
was
roles
created
because those
by
are tough
a
jobs.
very bold and brave political leader,
How did you
Lilian Truman,
deal
the foreign minister
with the
of the
environment,
Netherlands,
and also
she was
how did you
soon
break
joined
that
by many
stereotype and
other
become part of
political
that
leaders, initially in
negotiating
Europe,
team?
but also in Canada,
great to be part of
Afghanistan,
this, and because
increasingly
we
the
were
number of
a little
countries
delayed,
in
we all
Africa,
got to
and
have
we hope
a little seminar
more and
with
more
each other
countries in
before we
Asia
got to you all
will see
today,
their
so thank
ministers
you for
step
that
up and join the
opportunity.
movement, and we will be
I
launching the
said
first
to my
national
colleagues
movement
here that
in India
what I wanted to
in
most
March on
talk
the
about
anniversary of the
here
global movement
was
being
power.
created. And what we're about
How
is uniting that
a
political
lot of you in this
force and
audience have
community
it,
support,
and a
finding
lot of
all
us
of our
want
creativity and energy and activism
And
for
when
a
you
world
have
where
power,
every girl and woman
it's very
can
hard to give
decide
it up.
what to do with her body,
In the
with
times
her
I've
life,
had power
and
in
with
my
her
life,
future
I
without
didn't
question.
really want to share it
And
or
what we
give it
know
up.
is that when she
But
decides
we
the
are
world
at a
is
place
better,
where we know
stronger,
that
safer.
when girls are
She decides
educated,
whether, when,
it
and
is the
with
single
whom to have
most
sex,
important
to
factor
fall
in
in
rising
love,
GDP.
to marry, to have
As
children.
my colleagues have said, when
She
women are
has
in the
the right
workforce,
to
you get
information,
rising
to
GDP.
healthcare, to choose.
When women
She
are
is
on
free to feel
boards
pleasure,
of
to use
companies,
contraception,
it
to
increases the
access
return on
abortion
investment
safely, to decide.
and increases
Free
sales.
from pressure,
There's data,
free from
there's an
harm,
economic
free from
backdrop
judgment
to
and
this.
fear.
So if you guys
Because
want
when
to
others
succeed,
decide for her, she faces
I would
violence,
urge you to share a little
forced
power
marriage,
because you'll get
oppression.
more.
She faces
back
risks
in
to her
return.
health, to her dignity, to
So
her
to go
dreams, to
to
her
the
life.
question that
When she does not
you
decide,
asked,
she cannot create the life
a
she
very
deserves,
unusual circumstance.
the family she wants,
The
a
High
prosperous
Representative
future
of the
to call her
European
own.
Union
And we and you and
organized
he
and ran
and they
the
are
P5+1,
uniting,
the permanent
standing
members
together
of the
with her
Security
so she
Council
can
plus
make the
Germany
decisions
in
only she should
negotiations
make.
with Iran.
Political
And it was
leadership and
first
social
Cathy
momentum
Ashton
are
and
coming
Federica
together like
Mogherini.
never before. But we can go
The
further and we can
deputy
do more.
to the
And
High
from
Representative
today,
Helga
we fight
Schmidt, a
against the
phenomenal
fear,
German
we right the
diplomat.
wrongs, we
Probably
mobilize
spent more
political and
time
financial
negotiating with
support,
the Iranians than
we
anybody.
work to make laws and policies
And
just.
I led the American
We
team,
stand up
so
for
you
what is
had
right,
the entire
and
Iran
together we create
negotiation
that world that is better,
predominantly
stronger,
led
safer,
by women, of course.
but only
Secretary
if
Kerry,
and
Secretary
only
Moniz
when
on the American
she
side, President
decides.
Obama were
And that's our
absolutely critical
manifesto,
and very
which
engaged.
was
But it was
written
a
by some
very
very
unusual
talented
circumstance.
people, and I
And
think
one
it
of the things
expresses
that
what's fundamental
my dear
to this,
friend,
and you've heard
business
from other
partner, and
speakers.
former
We
boss
want to
Madeleine
bring women
Albright
into the labour market.
once taught me
We
is
know that
that
when girls are educated,
when
that
I
they
sit
can
at a
they make
negotiating
massive
table, I'm
impacts
not
on their
Wendy
economies.
Sherman, I'm
But
not a
those
woman
things
in
don't
this
happen
case, I was not
if
a Jewish
14-year-old is
American
forced
woman.
into marriage.
I was the
Those
United
things don't
States of
happen
America.
when she's raped
And
at
that's
the
a
age
lot
of
of
15.
power.
Those things don't
And I
happen when
had
she
no
can't access
qualms about
contraception.
using
Those
that
things
power.
don't happen when she
And I
doesn't
think
know
what we
that
women
she's been
have to
touched at the age of
understand,
10.
and what we
and
have
so when
to
she goes
own
for an abortion, it's
is
too
not
late.
to be afraid
We
to
need
use
to
that
teach our
power and
girls
to
and we
take
need to
that
teach our
power.
women. We need
Whether
to make
we are
the
talking
money
about sexual
available for the
violence,
services to
which
be there.
is very
And we
present
need to
in my
stop
own
the
country
policies
at
that
the
stand in
moment.
the way.
It's
So why
present
now and
everywhere
why
in the
India?
world, and certainly
Well,
for
this
poor
was started
women,
a year ago
there
because
are
there
no
were global
resources, there are
policies
no ways
initiated
to
by the
deal with
president
sexual
in the
harassment,
US,
sexual
which
abuse, sexual
damaged
misconduct.
the ability
But
of
even wealthy
organisations
women in
all
my
over the
society,
world
our famous
to enable girls
actresses,
to
our famous
decide.
models,
And countries
have
like
faced
India
now
have been progressive on this front.
huge
Sexual rights and reproductive
sexual
justice is
misconduct,
about
and
economies.
finally
It
can
is
talk
about
about it,
safety.
finally
It is
can
about
own their own
security.
power
And so we need to
in
work
the
with those
universe,
progressive leaders
and that is essentially
to
what
make
it's
sure
about. Many years
that we
ago,
can move forward
I started
globally
like
to achieve
not
a
as a
world where
national
girls
security
decide
person,
and
but
women
as a
decide.
social worker, as a community
Thank you.
organizer.
I would like to
And I
turn
did
to
a
our
study many years ago.
minister here.
Women
You've
start
traveled
most
from
community
education
organizations
to
in the United
textiles,
States. It's
which is like
probably
traditional
true
manufacturing,
in the entire
and also
world,
now you're
and they do
presiding
so
over
because
the
they want to
Information
get
and Broadcasting
a stop
Ministry,
sign
which
so
has
that
enormous
children can play
communicative power,
safely.
and you are
Or they want to get better
sort
schools
of
for their children, and
presiding
they want to
over
get
it,
a
and
toilet
we're saying that
for their child.
in your
or they want to
experience,
have
as you've gone
opportunities for
through
their children.
all these roles,
And as soon as
both
money
as part of
started
the
coming
cabinet
into
and
those
in the
community
government,
organizations in the
what
United
have
States,
been your main
men
takeaways or main
somehow
experiences in terms
ended
of
up taking over.
understanding how
They
women are
became the
dealing
executive
with this
directors,
question
they
of
became the
participation
leaders, they
in
became
India's
the presidents of the
if you see
organization and the women
27% participation
disappeared
only in the
because
workforce,
it
if that
was
number
about
were to be
gaining
changed,
that economic
if
and
we
that
were to increase
fundamental
by
power.
10%,
So my
our GDP
message
would go up by double
to
digit.
everyone in the room today
I think in previously
is
you've
to
talked
get
about
the
very
best
simple
out of
steps
all of
like
the
the
people
Universal
in our
Child Program,
societies
right? In terms of
to
keeping
end
back
the
girls in school.
discrimination that exists,
What have been our main
to
takeaways
end
in
the
terms of
sexual
interventions which the
harassment
government
is for
has
women
done?
to own their
And what
own
do you
power
see
and not be afraid
using
of
this
it?
communicative
It is
power
not a
which you
bad and
have
dirty
through the
thing.
Information and
It's
Broadcasting
how it
Ministry in
gets
terms of
used that makes
conditioning
it bad
behaviors?
and dirty and corrupt. And for men to understand
got
that you
invited
have
to
mothers
this
and
dialogue
sisters and
series,
daughters,
the first question I asked
and you
Samir
want
Saran
for
was,
them
why
what
me
you
again?
want for yourselves, which is every
He said, well,
opportunity
you're a
there might be in
disruptor.
the world So
And I
please
said,
do
why am I a
everything you
disruptor?
can to ensure they get
He
it.
said, well, you can speak what comes to your mind, and hence you're a disruptor in administration.
So,
And then I looked at
when he talked
what
about
this dialogue
power
was all about
and
in the
Robin,
brief
the
that
work
is
which
available
you
on the
do
internet.
goes to the heart of that.
And that brief,
because
I,
you're
as
dealing
a
with the topic
little experiment,
which
just
is
gave it
so
to 5
fundamental
women
to all
who are
women.
not in
It's about
administration,
reproductive rights. It's
who are
about
hoping
reproductive
to be a
health.
part of
And
decision making
we
and
are
want
now
to
in
be
an extraordinary
policy
situation,
analysts.
as you're sharing
And I
with
told
me
them
before
that
this
read the
panel,
ORF
in terms
brief
of the work which
and
you
then
are
tell
doing,
me what
which
should I
through
say
He or
today.
She decides.
The brief that
the
is
initiative which
available
you are
online
leading and which India
is about
going to
justifying
join and which
why
you're going
women
to
should
announce
have
the
an
program,
enhanced role
soon in a
in
matter
either
of few weeks.
administration
Do you want
or
to talk
policy
about
making.
what are the
And every
challenges
girl
which you
that
are
I told
facing now
to
in
give me
this
research
moment? What
came
is
back
your
with numbers
expectation
exactly
from the
that I
India
heard
program
on
and the
this
role
dais
that we
today,
can play as a country
telling me that
in
they
helping
spend
support these
more
goals
on
and be an
social
example
issues,
in our
telling
region
me
and
that
rest
they
of the world?
focus a lot on education and healthcare,
thank you to all the panelists.
telling me that whenever money comes in, as Wendy said, they come in,
We did have the great
the men come
advantage
in,
of
and
a
then
little
they
seminar
become
amongst each other.
focused on
And many of you've
infrastructure
spoken
and
to
big
some of the
spending.
really critical issues
But none
that
of the
we face
5
in
girls told
society.
me
She Decides was
that
created
women
under
can
a year
become
ago, and it
the
was
focal
created
point of an
by
economy
a
because
very
they are
bold and
competent.
brave political leader, Lilian Ploumen, the foreign minister
And
of
I
the
asked them a
Netherlands. And she was
question in
soon
return.
joined
I
by
said,
many
have you ever
other
had an
political
opportunity
leaders,
in your
initially in Europe,
entire
but also
adult
in
life
Canada,
where
Afghanistan,
you've seen 5
increasingly the number
competent
of
men
countries in
sit
Africa,
on a
and we hope,
platform and
more
justify
countries in
why
Asia,
they have a greater
will
say
see their
in
ministers
things.
step up and join the movement, and we will be launching the first national movement here in India in March. On
So
the
we have
anniversary
5
of
women
the
here
global
from
movement
across
being
the world
created.
speaking for our
And what we're
entire
about is
agenda
uniting that political force
and convincing
community
people
support, finding all of our
why women
creativity
should
and
be
energy and activism for a world
bigger
where every
part
girl
of
and woman
decision-making.
can decide what to do with her body,
I think that
with her
is
life,
where
and
the
with her
entire
future without
inequality
question.
stems from.
And what we know is that
The
when
fact
she
that we have to
decides the world
explain
is better, stronger,
that yes,
safer, she
and do a
decides whether,
comparative
when,
that I'm
and
as
with
competent
whom
as a man.
to have sex, to fall in love,
The fact that even in
marry,
your
to
question
have
to
children,
Wendy, you had
she
to
has
say,
the right
Wendy,
to
you were a part
information,
of a
to
decision
healthcare,
making,
to
there was
choose.
huge data.
She is free to feel pleasure,
And
to use
you hold her in
contraception,
awe
to access
because she
abortion
could sit
safely,
there and
to
crunch that
decide.
data.
Free from pressure,
And
free
I
from
compliment
harm,
Wendy that she
free
just
from
sidestepped
judgment
that
and
and she
fear.
said this is about power.
Because when
It
others
is not
decide
about data
for her, she
crunching.
faces
It is about
violence,
being in that
forced
position and
marriage,
saying,
oppression.
I'm in this position,
She faces
I speak
risks
for
to
this
her health,
office.
to her dignity, to her dreams,
So when you
to her
speak
life.
for that office, what
When she
comes?
does not decide, she cannot create
The
the, life she
fact that
deserves,
Gabriella had to say
the
that they
family
had
she
to
wants,
maneuver
a
a gender
prosperous
issue in
future to call her
G20
own. And we
speaks a
and
lot.
you and he
Because
and they
the
are
presumption
uniting,
is
standing
that
together
these
with her so she can
deviations and
make the
movements
decisions
and
only
flight
she
tricks
should
happen
make.
only in emerging
Political
economies,
leadership and social
only in
momentum are
economies
coming
which
together
do
like
not
never
look at
before.
women as the
But we can
empowered
go
lot.
further and we can do more.
The fact that
And from
at the
today,
table,
we fight
Gabriella had to
against
sit
the
and
fear,
strategize.
we right the wrongs,
How to put
we
gender
mobilise
ahead
political and financial
speaks
support,
volumes.
we work to make laws and policies just,
How did the government
we stand up for what
look
is right,
at
and together
servicing
we
the gender
create
issue?
that world that is better, stronger,
If you're looking
safer,
at disruptors,
but only if
the fact
and only
today that
when
in this government,
she
the Ministry of
decides.
Women and Child
And that's our
Welfare
manifesto,
has a man
which was written
equally
by some
positioned as a
very
woman
talented
to
people, and I
serve
think it
the
expresses
needs
what
of women and children
fundamental
in
to
this
this, and we've
country.
heard from
I
other
think
speakers.
that is a very
We want to
big
bring women into the labour
administrative
market.
disruption.
We know that when
But I
girls
don't
are
see that man on the
educated,
stage
that they can they make
see all
massive
these
impacts on their
gentlemen
economies. But those things
listening
don't
to us,
happen
but
if
that
a 14-year-old
gentleman
is
who's
forced
in
into
an
marriage.
administrative post
Those things don't
serving
happen
the interests of
when
women
she's
in our
raped at
country
the age
is
of 15.
not here today.
Those things don't
And I
happen when
think
she
that
can't
should give
access
us a
contraception.
little pause for
Those
introspection.
things don't happen when
That
she doesn't
whether we
know
as women
that she's
only
been touched at the
identify
age of
our
10.
gender
And
to
so
be
when
the
she goes for an abortion,
problem
it's
solvers.
too late. We
Or do
need
we
to
view
teach our girls
women,
and we need to
men
teach our women. We need to
equally
make the money
participative in
available for the
administration
services to be there.
of
And we need
applying
to stop the
themselves to
policies
solutions
stand
that
in
men
the
and
way.
women
so
both
why
need
now
in
and
our
why
country.
India? Well, this was started a year ago.
When I look
because
back
there
at
were
my
global
administrative
policies
life of
initiated
3.5
by the president
years,
in the US, which
as an
damaged
administrator,
the
not as
ability
a woman,
of
as an
organisations
administrator,
all
I'm
over
proud
the
of the
world
fact that my
to
Prime
enable girls
Minister
to decide.
said that that when you look at the
countries like
basic
India
needs of a
feel
girl
very
going to
front.
school, she drops
Sexual
out
rights
of
and
school
reproductive
because
justice
she
is
doesn't
about
have a
economy.
toilet
It is
separately to go
about
to.
safety. It is about
So he said, what has
security.
never been
And so we
done in
need
the
to work
history
with
of
those
our
progressive
democracy, can we do
leaders
it in 1
to
year?
make sure
Can we
that we
build
move
a
forward
toilet
globally
for
to
girl
achieve a
child
world where
in
girls
every
decide
government
and
school
women
in the
decide?
country? But can we do it
Thank
in
you.
1 year?
I would like to turn to
We
our
build over
minister here.
400,000
You've traveled
toilets
from
in 1 year.
education to
That is a record
textiles,
for any
which is like
economy in
traditional
this country.
manufacturing. And also now
in the
you're
world.
presiding over the Information and Broadcasting
And what did we see?
Ministry,
We
which
saw
has
more and
enormous
more girls
communicative
get
power.
enrolled.
And you
Why?
are,
Because they didn't have to go
sort
home
of
or skip school
presiding
or
over
just
it and overseeing
walk
that.
out of school just
in your,
because
in your
they were
experience, as you
getting
gone
into a
through
period of
all these
life
roles,
where they
both
needed
as
that
part
facility
of the cabinet and
they
in the
wanted
government,
to shamelessly ask
what
about
have been your main takeaways
So I
or
think that
main
when you're looking at
experiences in
tools of
terms of
empowerment, these are the small
understanding
stories.
how women are dealing
I have a
with
story of
this
this
question
young
of participation?
37-year-old
India's
tribal girl
statistic,
who
if you
becomes
see
a sarpanch
27% participation only
and
in the
says that,
workforce,
well,
if
mostly
that number
the
were to be
citizens that I
changed,
serve come from
if we
poor
were to increase
families.
by 10%,
What do?
our GDP would go
She
up
looks
by
at
double
other
digit.
aspects of administration and
I
service,
think in
but she
previously
says,
you've
I will
talked
take a
about very
30,000
simple
rupee
steps
loan.
like the Universal Toilet
I
Program,
will go
right? In
get
terms of keeping
everybody,
back
men and
girls in
women
school.
included, tools
What have been
for
your main
farming,
takeaways in terms of interventions
tools
which the
for
government has done?
horticulture,
And
lease
what
it
do
to
you
them.
see
Not
using
take
this
a government
communicative
grant.
power
This is
which you
somebody
have
who's
through the
already
Information
in
and
an
Broadcasting
administrative
Ministry in
position,
terms of
but understand that I
conditioning
will take that
behaviors?
loan from a bank, give it to people, make them self-sufficient, and
when I got invited
administratively
to
I'll
this
focus on
dialogue
rainwater
series,
harvesting.
the first
For me,
question I
that
asked
tribal
Samir Sada,
girl,
who's wide me
37
again,
years of age,
she
she's
said,
a
well,
hero.
you're a disruptor.
Because she knew that finances I'll
And I
take
said,
from a
why
bank,
am I a
pay them
disruptor?
back, have my community
He said,
empowered.
well, you can
but administratively,
speak
I'll
what
look
comes
at
to your
as a
mind.
tribal leader.
And hence you're a
what
disruptor
happens.
in administration.
Those are the fascinating stories.
And then
When
I
we say
looked at
that
what this
only
dialogue
look
was
at
all about in
education,
the brief
only
that
look
is
at health
available
because
on
we
the
are
internet.
women. I think that is the greatest
And that
injustice we
brief,
do to
I, as a
ourselves as competitors.
little experiment, gave
And that is the
it to
greatest
5
insult we
women
can thrust
who are
upon
not
a
in
man, that you do
administration,
not have the
who are
competence to look
hoping
at
to be a part
education
of
and
decision
health from a
making
female
and want to be
perspective.
policy
I think
analysts.
they're equally empowered
And I told
when
them,
given
read the
administrative
ORF
post.
brief
The only pathway
and then
we
tell
have
me
to
what should I
design
say
now
today.
is how
brief
can
that
that
is
policy
available
decision
online
become gender neutral?
is about justifying
Why
the
women
only
should have an
decision I
enhanced
want
role
as a woman
in
today
either administration
is not to
or
be
policy
excluded
making.
from the whole process just
And
because
every
I'm a
girl
woman.
that I told
Exclude
give
me
me
by all
research,
means if I'm
came back
incompetent.
with numbers exactly that I've heard on this.
And I think that
today.
is the balance that we need
Telling
to
me
reach.
that women
Like
spend
Wendy
more
said,
on
and I clapped
social
the
issues,
loudest when she spoke.
telling
Don't
me
be
that they
afraid
focus
when
a
you
lot
sit
on
there
education and
and
healthcare,
exercise that power.
telling me that
Don't
whenever
be
money
squeamish
comes
about
in,
it.
as Wendy said, they
But
come
be
in,
equally
the men
aware
come
that
in,
if
and
you're
then they
incompetent,
become
you will
kicked
focused
out
on
and do not use
infrastructure
your
and
gender
big
as a crutch.
spending. But none of the 5 girls told me that women can become the focal point of an economy.
But we
because
also
they are
face,
competent.
there's also this narrative out there that there's unconscious
And I
bias,
asked them a
right?
question in
And we
return.
see
I
that
said, have you ever had
very
an
frequently
opportunity in
demonstrated.
your
There are a
entire
number of
adult
case
life
studies on that.
where
There's
you've
a big
seen 5
course,
competent men
which is
sit on a
about managing
platform and
unconscious bias,
justify
because everybody
why
has that
they have a
bias.
greater
And
say
that
in
appears as a
things.
filter, right? Like there are business schools which are teaching this program. In terms of future proofing, particularly
So we
in
have
the
5
STEM
women
area,
here
in
from
the
across
science and
the world
technology
speaking
area,
for our entire
to
gender.
build off from an
And
initial base to
convincing
take it to the
people
next layer, particularly
why
when you
women
have
should be
more cutting edge technologies like AI
a bigger part
and other
of
stuff
decision
coming in. How do we make sure
I think that is where the
that from a
entire
pipeline
inequality stems
perspective,
from.
what are the set of
The fact that
incentives
we have to explain
which we are creating within the
that
STEM
yes,
education fold to make sure
and do a
that at
comparative
least in
that I'm as
AI and in the
competent as a
newer
man.
newer age cutting edge
fact that
technology
even in your
development area,
question
we
to
see greater
Wendy,
participation by women.
You had to say, Wendy,
How are you thinking
you were a
about that
part of a
aspect?
decision making
Yeah,
that was huge data.
So I'm very grateful to have learned a lot from my
And
panelists.
you hold her in
And,
awe
I would like to say
because she
that
could
even
sit
for,
there
you
and
know, for the
crunch
field
that
of
data.
AI computer science, it is still
And
about power.
I compliment Wendy that she just
So let me
sidestepped
explain.
that and she said this is
Historically,
about
computer
power.
science is
It
a
is
new
not
field.
about data
AI
crunching.
only a few
It is
decades
about
old.
being in that
And
position
historically,
saying,
computer science
I'm
spun
in
off
this
from
position, I
electrical
speak for this
engineering.
office.
And as a software field,
So when you
compared to
speak
the
for that
hardware
office,
field, which
what
it was
comes?
actually very female dominated at the
The
beginning.
fact that
So the
Gabriela
first
had
computer
to say that
programmers
they had to
were women,
maneuver a gender
and
issue
so
in
on.
G20.
And the
Speaks a
participation
lot.
of women in the field of
Because
computer
the
science,
presumption
however,
is
peaked
that these
at
deviations and
around,
movements
around
and slight
1984,
tricks happen
where
only in
there were
emerging
37%
economies, only in
women,
economies which do
in
not
computer
look at
science.
women
And today
as the
we
empowered
have
lot.
18%.
The
And
fact
this is
that the
from
G20
the
table, Gabriela had to
wealthiest
sit and
economies in the world.
strategize.
The
How
reason
to put
being,
gender ahead
software
speaks
computer
volumes.
So computer science as a field started to become
How
more
did the
dominant in our
government
economies.
look at
right? So the
servicing
boys
the
see
gender
that they
issue?
can make more money being software engineers.
If you're looking at disruptors,
so it is
the
about
fact
the
that
economic
in
power.
this
So there are
government,
more
the Ministry of
men
Women and
coming
Child
into,
Welfare
computer science
has a
and joining
man
out
equally
women.
positioned as a woman
And that's
to serve
actually quite
the
rare
needs of women
in
and children
STEM
in this
fields.
country.
Usually we
I
see
think
progress.
that is a very
In
big
computer science, we have seen a
administrative
decline
disruption.
in
I
the
don't see that
participation
man
of
on the
women,
stage.
which is a very worrisome trend.
I see all these gentlemen
And the
listening to
unconscious
us,
bias
but that
in
gentleman
our
who's
field
in an
is
administrative
similar
post,
to any other
serving
field.
the interests of women
The
in our
only
country
difference
is
being
not here today.
we in
And I
computer
think
science
that should
think
give
that
us a
we are
little
not
pause for
biased.
introspection.
So the idea
That
is
whether
that
we as women
traditional
only
industries
identify
are people
our
aware
gender
of
to be this
sexism,
problem
but in computer
solvers.
science we think
Or
that
do
we
we
are
view
very based,
men
that
equally
we're actually
participative
doing very
in
well,
administration
but the truth is the opposite.
of
So
applying
in recent
themselves
years,
to
we
solution that men and women both need in our
have
country.
seen discussions about
When I look
the
back at my
the
administrative
toxic
life of
masculinity
3.5
in the tech
years,
area, even in the software
as an
industry.
administrator, not as a
people
woman,
should-
as an
people
administrator,
always
I'm proud
thought
of the fact that my Prime
the
Minister
male geeks
said that
The
when you look
image
at
of
the
the
basic
male
needs
geeks
of a
are
girl
they are
going
more
to school,
feminine,
she drops
and they're
out
more
of school
open, and so on
because
and
she
so
doesn't
forth.
have a toilet
That's not the
separately to
truth
go
at all.
to.
I've
So he
studied
said
and
what
worked
has never
with
been
male
done
geeks
in the history
since
of
I
our
was
democracy. Can
18.
we do it in 1 year?
And
Can we
it's
build
a different
a
form
toilet
of,
for
there's
a
a
girl
different form
child
of
in
toxic
every government school in
masculinity
the country?
from the kind
But can we do
that's
it in
what we
1
see
year?
as the traditional
We
masculinity.
build
And
over
unfortunately, in that
400,000
culture,
toilets in 1 year. That
there's
is a
this,
record for any economy
because
in this
there's
country.
no self-awareness
In the world.
from these male geeks that they are
And what did
actually
we
also
see? We
sexist
saw
and
more
very
and
much
more
so.
girls get enrolled. Why? Because they didn't have to
so
go
the
home
problem
or
just
skip
started to
school
be
or
seen
just
as legitimate problem,
walk out of
sexism
school
in the
just
software
because
industry.
they
And
were
in AI,
getting
we
into
have
a
only
period of
started
life
discussing this
where they
in recent
needed that
years,
facility
very much,
and they wanted to
only in
shamelessly
recent months,
ask
I would
about
say
it.
there's an active discussion.
So I
on
think that when you're
women in
looking
AI
at tools of
and sexism in
empowerment,
AI
these are the
in
small
recent,
stories.
in recent,
I have
in
a story
recent
of
months.
this young
In my own
37-year-old
field of AI, I
tribal
have
girl
seen the
who
field
becomes a
going from,
sarpanch
more
and
traditionally,
says that,
I
well,
don't wanna
mostly
say that.
the citizens that I
Less
serve come from
traditionally
poor families.
masculine to more
What do I
traditional
do?
masculine. When I started in
She
my
looks
field
at other
in
aspects of
20 years ago,
administration and
I
service,
was
but she
told
says,
by,
I will take a
people
30,000
that
rupee loan.
my published papers,
I
my
will
work,
go get
my kind of
everybody,
work
men
is
and
more
women
masculine.
included,
And they were
tools for
surprised
farming,
always to find out when I
tools for
when I
horticulture,
publish my work,
lease
when I
it to
come
them,
out to speak in conferences,
not take a
that I'm
government
actually a
grant.
woman.
This is somebody who's already in an administrative
Because my
position,
field has
but
gone
understands
from,
that I
so
will
my
take
field
that
of
loan
natural
from a
language
bank,
processing has
give
gone
it to
from the
people, make
traditional
them
AI
self-sufficient,
approach of
and
knowledge-based and so on,
administratively I'll
expert-based,
focus on
to a
rainwater
more
harvest.
quantitative approach.
For
and
me,
with
that
recent years,
tribal
more
girl,
deep learning
37
based,
years
machine
of
learning
age,
based.
she
With
is a
that, the
hero.
face of AI changed
Because she
to
knew
become
that
more
finances I'll take from a bank,
to
pay
combat
them
that,
back,
which
have
is,
my
you know,
community empowered.
people didn't
But
pay attention to it.
administratively,
When people are
I
not
look
paying
at
attention
as
to
a
AI,
tribal leader,
we tend to have more women.
rainwater harvesting.
So when it becomes a
Those are
very
fascinating
competitive
stories.
field
When
and
we
where
say
there's where money
that
is at,
only look at
then there are more
education,
men.
only look at health
So
because we have
it's still
women.
about power.
I think that is the
It's
greatest
still about power.
injustice we
And
do
so
to
the message
ourselves
is
as
still
competent
for the
women.
young girls to see role
And that is the
models
greatest insult
of
when you
women
trust
in
upon a
power.
man, that you
Not
do
just
not
women
have the
scientists,
competence
you
to
know,
look
women
at
geeks.
education
That's not even
and
the issue.
health from a female
Not many
perspective.
girls
I think
aspire to
they're
becoming
equally
geeks.
empowered
No, they won't
when
tell me,
given
"I wanna be like you
administrative
'cause
posts. The
you're a geek."
only pathway we have to
That's
design
that's
now
not the reason they want to be. They want to
is
see.
how
they
can
want
that
to be
policy
in
decision
the
become
field because
gender
they see that as a
the only
tool of
decision
power,
I
as
want as a woman
as a
today
tool
is
to,
not to be
prosperity
excluded from the
again,
whole process
and
just
to,
because I'm a
self-empowerment.
woman.
So that's the
Exclude
message.
me
And
by
thank
all
you for
means if I'm
bringing that up.
incompetent.
Yeah, I think there
And I
is
think
this
that is the
conscious
balance that we
combat
need
now
to
against the
reach.
bro code,
Like Wendy
which you
said,
talked about.
and I
because
clapped the
that
loudest when she
is something
spoke.
which
Don't be
definitely
afraid when you
varies
sit
very
there and
cognizant
exercise
of
that power.
that is an infection
Don't be
which has to
squeamish
be
about
dealt
it.
with.
But be
And
equally
also, I
aware
think
that
the
if
role
you're
modeling point
incompetent,
which you
you will
talked about
be
is
kicked
very
out and
critical.
do not use your
And there
agenda
are
as a
these
crutch.
forums which are now being created in terms of recognizing excellence, and that can help in facilitating those conversations.
But we also
as well.
face, there's
They're
also
very
this
related
narrative
to the
out there
points
that there's
which Pascal
unconscious
made, which is
bias,
about
right?
the
Like,
economic
and we
power
see that
being a very frequently
frequently
demonstrated
factor,
there are
both
a number
from a
of
modeling
case
studies of
perspective
that.
for
There's a
young
big
women to
course
start getting
which
gravitated
is
towards these
about
new age
managing unconscious
technologies and
bias
build a
because
career
everybody
there.
has that bias.
You
and
talked
that appears
about
as a filter, right? Like there
the
are business schools
pay
which are
gaps.
teaching this
And I
program.
know that the OECD
in terms
Gender
of future
Initiative one of the areas which you
particularly in the
have
STEM
studied
area, in the
as
science and
a-
technology area, to build off from an initial base to take it to the next layer, particularly when you have more cutting edge technologies like AI and other stuff coming in. How do we make sure that from a pipeline perspective, what are the set of incentives which we are creating within the STEM education fold to make sure that at least in AI and in the newer age, cutting edge technology development area, we see greater participation by women. How are you thinking about that, Pascal?
Yeah, So I'm very grateful to have learned a lot from my co-panelists. And I would like to say that even for the field of AI, computer science, it is still about power. So let me explain. Historically, computer science is a new field. AI only a few decades old. And historically, computer science spun off from electrical engineering. And as a software field, compared to the hardware field, which it was actually very female-dominated at the beginning. So the first computer programmers were women, and so on. And the participation of women in the field of computer science, however, peaked at around 1984, where there were 37% women in computer science. And today, we have 18%. And this is from the wealthiest economies in the world. The reason being, so computer science as a field started to become more dominant in our economies. All right? So the boys see that they can make more money being software engineers. So it is about the economic power. So there are more men coming into computer science and driving out the women. And that's actually quite rare in STEM fields. Usually we see progress. But in computer science, we have seen a decline in participation of women, which is a very worrisome trend. And the unconscious bias in our field is similar to any other field. The only difference being we, in computer science, think that we are not biased. Yeah. So the idea is that, in traditional industries, people are aware of sexism, but in computer science, we think that we are merit-based, that we're actually doing very well, but the truth is the opposite. So in recent years, we finally have seen discussions about the toxic masculinity in the tech area, even in the software industry. People always thought that the male geeks, the image of the male geeks, they are more feminine and they're more open and so on and so forth. That's not the truth at all. I've studied and worked with male geeks since I was 18. And there's a different form of toxic masculinity from the kind that's what we see as the traditional masculinity. And unfortunately, in that culture, there is this, because there's no self-awareness from these male geeks, that they are actually also sexist, and very much so. And so the problem just started to be seen as a legitimate problem, the sexism in the software industry. And in AI, we have only started discussing this in recent years, and very much only in recent months, I would say. There's an active discussion on women in AI and sexism in AI in recent months. In my own field of AI, I have seen the field going from more traditionally, I don't want to say that, less traditionally masculine to more traditionally masculine. When I started in my field 20 years ago, I was told by people that my published papers, my kind of work is more masculine. And they were surprised always to find out when I publish my work and when I come out to speak in conferences that I'm actually a woman. Because my field has gone from, my field of natural language processing has gone from the traditional AI approach of knowledge-based and so on, expert-based, to more quantitative approach, and with recent years, more deep learning-based, machine learning-based. With that, the face of AI changed to become more masculine. And to combat that, which is, people didn't pay attention to AI. When people were not paying attention to AI, we tend to have more women. So when it becomes a very competitive field and where money is at, then there are more men. So it's still about power. It's still about power. And so the message is still for the young girls to see role models of women in power. Not just women scientists, women geeks. That's not even the issue. Not many girls aspire to becoming geeks. They won't tell me I want to be like you because you're a geek. I mean, that's not the reason they want to be. They want to be in the field because they see that as a tool of power, as a tool to prosperity again, and to self-empowerment. So that's the message. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think there is this conscious combat now against the bro code, which you talked about, because that is something which definitely Valley is very cognizant of. that this is an infection which has to be dealt with. And also, I think the role modeling point which you talked about is very critical. And there are these forums which are now being created in terms of recognizing excellence, right? And that can help in facilitating those conversations as well. Gabriele, related to the points which Pascal made, which is about the economic power being a big motivational factor, both from a modeling perspective and for young women to start getting gravitated towards these new age technologies and build a career there. You talked about the pay gaps. And I know that the OECD Gender Initiative, one of the areas which you have studied as a part of the gender initiative is also the pay gaps. How much of progress do you think the OECD countries are making? Is there anything which we need to learn from there in terms, first of all, recognizing the centrality that this is a problem which exists, that you have differentiated paychecks which are paid to men and women, and what are the best ideas in terms of having some honest conversations around that, and then making sure that we get an equal share, that women are getting an equal share of their paycheck.
Thank you, and yes, this is a fantastic panel. I'm learning a lot from everybody, and I have a comment about competencies, because that's one of the issues in which we frame also the work at the OECD. Everything is related. Why there is a wage cap? Why people doing the same job? I think it's a question of fairness. It's a question of legal standing. It's a question of recognizing that same efforts, same payment. But then it starts from the whole, as I said, the stereotyping and the roles and the biases that exist for women to have equal standing. And that's why I insist. I think that the playing field is not even, and you need to level because of this understanding of what is the role of men and what is the role of women. Wage caps starts with the fact that women choose or are expected to choose disciplines that are less rewarded in the markets. STEM disciplines usually, as you say, but you are not expected. And we have documented that because we are the organization that has the program for international student assessment that is measuring outcomes in education. But we also ask girls and we also ask families, what do they expect for their children? And usually when you ask them, do you expect your girl to go for engineering, science, mathematics? No, that's not an area for girls. And girls said no, families said no, teachers said no. What do you get? Well, you get very few women going for those highly well-paid disciplines. How do you change that? It's very complex. How do you build the self-esteem that we see in this panel, in all girls and all women, when you are taught in the school and you are taught in the family that you should not go into those directions that are not for girls? It's just embedded in that. We have measured also that self-confidence in girls is lower. And that's dramatic. Because you have the top performing girls in this instrument that we have in maths, and the top performing boys, we ask them, are you good in maths? Both of them are the top performers. 30% of girls say, yes, I am, and 60% of boys say, yes, I am. So there is this kind of social depiction of what you are meant to do in one way or another. And I think it's embedded in how you get these then economic outcomes that are in that sense. One area in which we are really concerned, because there have been many progress in terms of labor market rules and policies to allow women to get into better positions in different areas. But entrepreneurship, business sector, why women ask for less financing? This is not about men, okay? This is about women. Why women ask for less financing? And this is documented too. Or why do they have less access to financing? Why their SMEs grow slower than men? Well, because we have this question of self-confidence that is embedded in the role modeling, the expectations that societies have for women. How do you change that? It's just very difficult. And then there is this is fantastic depiction when you say, oh my God, no, these women, they don't take risks. They are not daring. But if you go with the girls that are trying to jump into a tree, or no, don't do that because you're a little girl. Please behave. You should take care of you. No, you need to show them, and you need to push them to be daring and to take the risk for doing those things. So this is a question of, yes, policies. This is a question of being aware that these things happen. This is a question of providing the policy setting that will compensate for these issues. I think that there are countries like Norway, Ireland, Iceland that have just legislated that there should not be a wage gap as a legal issue. There are some other countries that are more conscious in terms of looking at the economic structure to try to avoid that these things happen. There are countries that are encouraging girls to go for STEM issues. There are countries that are eliminating gender bias in textbooks. Forget about white, blue and pink and kind of role modeling for girls since the very beginning. And so there are many ways in which we can address those issues to redress the fact. But I completely agree with what my colleague in the panels have referred to. It's not a question of just looking at women or girls. I think it's a question of looking at how do we build the policies for the societies to take care of these issues. So every single person have the possibility to do whatever they want to do, to choose. I completely agree with Robin, to make the choice they want to do independently of being women or girls, and to have the chance to do it. But until we are there, I think we need policies, Minister. I think we need quotas. I have to say, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to close with this comment that I shared with my colleague panelists beforehand. Mexico legislated a quota in Congress, 50%. And now is one of the most advanced countries in that respect. We are laggards in all of the others. But in the representation and leadership, we are doing well, 50%. And I was asked to review how this has been built, because you are completely right, Minister. We need to take care of merit. We need to take care of competencies. We need to take care of those things, because you don't just want to open the door for whatever reason. But I was with the President of Congress, who happened to be a man. We have not reached that position yet. And he said, I'm very worried about this quota because we are going to be full of incompetent women. And I said, well, Mr. President, we're full of incompetent men without a quota. So I agree. We might need to have more, because we're coming from behind. We might need to do more effort to show that we're there because we deserve to be there. But the fact is that it's an uphill battle, and we still need policies to redress this situation.
Thank you. I think you made a good point, but I think you made the point about individual action also. I think women are crummy negotiators when it comes for money. We do it to ourselves. I think we need to overcome this barrier ourselves. It's not really money, but it's like what kind of value which you're negotiating for, the economic value. But I do want to come to you, Minister, and ask you, what is your view on political quotas? And also, how are you, within your own political party, how are you looking at pipeline development and also attracting more younger women into politics and political organizing?
To say that putting a premium on competence means that you don't want to be gender friendly or supportive of a gender, I think is misconstruing the background from which I'm coming. As somebody who started from the lowest economic group as an individual with $20 in my pocket just a decade and a half ago, I can say this from a life experience. There are two things which I have witnessed. The Prime Minister started the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, which meant that a normal citizen wanting financial aid to develop a new business or to expand an existing business can take a small loan of 50,000 onwards to up to 10 lakh rupees. The only condition is that you need to draw up a business plan, go to a bank, convince the manager that your business plan makes sense and you are able to return that loan, and then take that financial aid from the banks. 75% of the beneficiaries today of that financial outreach program of the Prime Minister are women, which means that in our country, You have women coming from small towns, villages, walking up to bank managers, convincing them that their business plan makes more sense than anybody else who's walked into that same branch. And that fact that 75% of the beneficiaries of this financial agenda have women participating in such large numbers and paying back to banks, I think speaks volumes about the competence of, at least I can speak as an Indian woman, of the Indian woman today. The fact that in the organized sector, where wages and pro-labor reforms has been witnessed, the number of women compared to men is low, but in the unorganized sector, the number of women touches 90%, also speaks a different story. So when, let's say, Gabriela speaks about we are coming from behind, the question one needs to ask is, how many of us, apart from asking for an opportunity, also, once proving the competence, can ask for the price that we deserve? That's a very difficult ask, especially when you've been conditioned for years that if you ask for a little less than a man, even if you're either as competent or more competent than him, you are safer in a job. So professionally, before I was a minister or a member of parliament, I have faced a situation in my life where I've walked into my employee's room and I said, I need a raise. And the employee said, well, the guy working with you didn't get anything. And I said, well, I'm more competent and you need me in this job.
Yeah.
So what you decide for the gentleman is not my concern, but I need this raise. And the fallout of that was, I did get the raise, but other women started asking for what they wanted as well. So those are also the examples that we need to set, where you're not afraid to ask after you've proved your competence, that this is the price, or this is the package, or this is the salary I deserve. It's easier for us to say it from positions of power. It is difficult when somebody is doing a normal job. And I think that is where you need to empower women, when they can walk into a room after proving their competence and saying, I don't like this wage gap. Pay me. How many of us can embolden girls to walk in and say, this is the salary I deserve, this is the review I deserve, because I've proved I'm worthy of my job and my position, pay me. And I think that will make a huge difference. But also how we see power. Today, is power defined only by a political or administrative position? There are numbers and studies which show that a working woman and a woman who owns property, domestic violence for a working woman is much higher, and domestic violence against women who actually own property, and it's a study done in India, is only 8%. For me, even that 8% is too much. Yeah. But it's amazing that the power dynamics change in a family when the property and the house in which the family lives in suddenly belongs and is completely controlled by the woman. So we have to define even what is power for women across all silos, in all dynamic situations, because that is when these conversations can start. Today we are talking about more and more girls in STEM. We are talking about more and more women in administration, policy making. We need to also simultaneously talk about what is the economic worth, what is your go-home salary, what is your financial plan where you want to own, let's say, not only a business but also a home, a car, because there is, and without any qualms I'm saying this, there is a little bit of hesitation, even today in our societies, where a woman says, I want to own a house before I get married. And they said, why? Shouldn't you get married first and then simultaneously either own a house or own the house later, but get married first? Yeah. So it is okay to want a bigger bank balance. It is okay to want a house, because administratively, policy-wise, you can set the agenda, but ultimately you have to look at society to make that change, to migrate to a better place for girls and for women. So when you look at me from and ask me from a political point of view, what is it that I want politically? Well, in my political organization, it is a man who said that within my political organization, 33% of spaces will be reserved for women. I was not a woman who made that decision, it's a gentleman who made that decision. And we're the only party which said, okay, go ahead, give positions to women so that they become a part of the decision-making body as to who will get a ticket to become an MLA or an MP.
And that is where empowerment begins. You begin from scratch.
And do you personally support the quota movement?
I have seen a lot of women who would otherwise not be given an opportunity to prove their competence, if not for that quota, as you say it.
Affirmative action. Yeah.
Men are more afraid of me getting into that discussion because I would say, why curb me into only that much? So, like Gabriella said, well, there have been a lot of incompetent men. I haven't seen anybody crying hoarse about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Wendy, the 2016 races were, the whole world saw what the races were. What were the lessons in terms of America getting ready for a woman president whenever that happens? Like, what's your crystal ball? Do you think the country is ready, and by when will it get ready? What are the issues? What were the learnings? You headed the Emily's List, so you have your own experience in terms of sharing some perspectives.
So it's a pleasure to have an entire conversation not mention a particular political official in my country. So I want to thank you all for that. I do want to say, though, that there has been an explosion in America. And I think with all of the challenges that we've all been talking about, which are very profound and very deep and will take time and won't happen in a linear fashion, we'll make progress and then we'll take a step back. You guys will get scared and so things won't go so well. Then we'll take another step forward and then our daughters will go further than we might have gone. So it's not forward all the way, but in part because of our election, I think you all know, and many people here were part of it in India, we had millions, billions marching the day after the inauguration in the United States. That has had a profound result in my country. Emily's List, which I once was executive director of, which is a PAC for pro-choice Democratic women to run for a political office, in the prior year had 1,000 women come forward who wanted to get trained to run for elective office. As of today, they have had 23,000 women come forward who want to get trained for elective office. We have, I think, 40 women who are looking to run for Senate seats. We have hundreds of women looking to run for Congress. And I think it will be like a previous time in our history where we will have an enormous bump up in the number of women. I do not think it is an accident at all, given our election, that we have had this spotlight on sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. It has given women a sense that if they do not speak up, who will speak for them? We have had this debate this week about immigration and refugees and asylum seekers in my country, and I was on television, and I know Samira is worried about the time, so I'll go fast. But I would say the same for women. There is a very famous poem that came out of the 30s during the time of Hitler, and I sort of stole it to talk about our immigration crisis. I could steal it for women as well. In the immigration crisis, what I said was, first they came for the Salvadorans, and I did not speak up because I was not Salvadoran. Then they came for the Haitians, and I did not speak up because I was not Haitian. Then they came for the Africans, and I did not speak up because I was not African. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Yeah. So what I would say to all of us here today is that women, we have to speak up for ourselves because we cannot rely on anyone to speak for us. Men, you must speak up for your daughters and your sisters. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's my message for today. You must speak up for your daughters, your sisters, your mothers. And all of us need to speak up for each other because that is where the greatest power comes. That's where our GDP rises. That's where human rights shine. That's where there are toilets for our daughters. That is where there is education for our sons. So we have to do this together, and great things can happen. Not all at once, but great things can happen.
Yeah. We're very close to the end of our session. Robin, just one last question for you, and then we'll have to wrap. A lot of the work which you do, reproductive health, is increasingly colliding with politics. Choice is coming into a position of conflict with politics. What has been your experience, and how are you going to wait and navigate this tricky, thorny issue through?
Well, I think the moment is now. What we saw last year, as you've said so clearly, we saw it very particularly in the US, but we've seen it in many countries around the world. We've started to see the injustice. If each and every one of us just thinks about this body that is yours, that you have, you expect to make your own choices about it. And the fact that so many millions and billions of young girls and women on our planet do not have that fundamental human right has become made so public over the actions of last year, over the denial of services, over preventing people and women and girls from choosing for themselves, over the fact of sexual harassment and violence becoming visible. So last year, for me, is the year when we made it very visible, when we had all our hashtags, our She Decides, our Me Toos, our I'm Not a Cinderella. And this year must be the year where we make the change. I want to get to the end of this year where this is such a boring topic, my movement, because it's just normal. That's the social transformation we're going for, and that requires political leaders. And we've talked about men and their leadership. The day before I came here, I had the privilege of spending some time with the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium, a phenomenally pro-feminist man. And, you know, he just talks about feminism, sexual rights, reproductive justice as part of his daily life. As the vice leader of his country. We need you as men to stand up, particularly those of you with platforms and political power, to just make it normal. It shouldn't be a matter of sniggering. Sex and reproductive lives are part of all of our lives. And until we get to a point where every single human being has that control over her own body and his own body, has enough knowledge about her body that she can make choices, enough money in the system that she can access services, and laws and policies that make it easy for her to make good and healthy decisions for herself. It's that moment when our societies will change, when our economies will grow, and when she decides, and when we need to stop talking about this because our fundamental human rights will be observed. And let what happened last year be a tipping point so that we get there fast.
So thank you for being a wonderful audience, and thank you, panel, for spending an hour with us here today.
I think hunger is gender agnostic, and I think we need to have lunch now. So there's lunch at Rani Bagh, but there are also 4 conversations. At Mumtaz, we will discuss countering violent extremism, kilobytes, at Chak.